There are a few points that I found that were just not believable. One, and we talked in the last half hour with Jason Dick about this event at the Mayflower. You know, I mean, look, I've been in politics a long time. I was Democratic chair of California. I organized 100, if I organized one, events like this thing at the Mayflower, where there's a big speech. I mean, I did these for the President of the United States, for Bill Clinton. But you have a little group, a very select group of VIPs ahead of time who have a little reception, and the President comes in this case it was candidate Trump, and they're like, Jeff Sessions said there were like 24 people there. And he wants us to believe that he was there with his aide, that in the 24 people that he doesn't remember whether the Russian ambassador was one of them. I mean, Kislyak is not a tiny little guy whom you don't notice, right? Yeah.
He's a presence.
So he's a presence. He fills a room. So I don't believe that. Another thing I don't believe is he was saying, trying to make the case that, yes, I recused myself from the Russian investigation, but at the same time, I fired James Comey, was involved in firing James Comey, and in hiring another director of the FBI. And he said, there's no contradiction between those two. I think there is, right? How can you say there's not? If you say, I've got nothing to do with the Russian investigation, and then you fire the guy who's the head of the Russian investigation.
Well, I think what you would, if you're saying that the firing had nothing to do with the Russian investigation, that's a legitimate line of argument. The problem is that the president has himself undermined that entire argument, right?
Totally.
So, I mean, the FBI director does a lot. This is just one investigation among thousands that the FBI has going on at any one time. It's, you know, percentage-wise, it was probably a very small percentage of his daily, you know, day was actually taken up by this one particular investigation. It's a big job. But the problem there, right, of course, is that Trump said that that's what he was thinking of, and that's what this was all about. And, you know, Sessions sort of tried to ignore that in his testimony and tried to ignore that reality that the president has admitted this is what he was thinking about, and sort of worked under the theory, I suppose, that this was something that they discussed. And that may be true. I mean, they may have had that conversation before.
He would not even admit that he had a conversation with the president of the United States before he wrote that phony memo.
Right.
Or Rosenstein wrote the memo, and he said he agreed with it.
Right. And it's an interesting position they're taking, right? Because I think the story we sort of wrote yesterday is that there's a real hesitance on the part of Sessions, or I think the Trump administration, to use the term executive privilege. And a lot of that goes back to the fact that Donald Trump, during the sort of Fast and Furious scandal and the Obama era, didn't like the fact that they had taken executive privilege and sort of thought that made them look guilty, right? He's done the same sort of thing in the Clinton investigation and said when someone took the Fifth Amendment, they're guilty, right?
Yeah,
only the mob takes the Fifth Amendment. This is the line of argument that he had made, candidate Trump had made, and private citizen Trump way back in 2012. So it's difficult for them then to come out and say we're asserting executive privilege without the narrative sort of being taken out itself. I think in one of the tweets I remember Trump sort of referenced it as like, you know, said executive privilege, and how can they shield off Nixon comparisons? Well, if you're claiming executive privilege on these conversations, it's going to be sort of the same thing for the Trump administration. Those Nixon comparisons are suddenly going to become pretty relevant and pretty fair.